Jermaine Bay with Elodium Morris Pradium, Ante, Colorado. The acronym is AMPAC. I'm the Chief Judge of Consular Court. Today is Class 59. Class 59. What did we learn in Class 58? Well, we started learning more about some of the new organic modern states that are now on the record. Who are we talking about? AMPAC, right, and New Mecca. So we're very proud of them. They've now ratified, deposited, and promulgated the Constitution, and now they're enacting their Moorish law, right, their Moroccan law. So we want to say thank you very much to them for having the discipline and moving forward with checking the boxes. What else did we learn in Class 58? Well, we started learning more about the Act Algeciras of 1906, Chapter 3, right? So we started going over Articles 31 through 35. Today we'll pick up from Articles 36. We'll read to Articles 40, right? And if we have time, we'll get into Articles 41 through 45, right? We'll read 5 articles at a time, and we can go back and recap, reviewing, and get a basic comprehension of what we're reading, right? So keep in mind, Morris, what is this all about? This is about the triple principle, right? Although Chapter 3 is about the state bank is about what? Economic liberty without any inequality. That's what we're learning right now. What authority do Moors have by utilizing their treaty provisions? And one of the things we have to understand is about your gold bullions, right? It's about your precious metals. What precious metal? The metal that comes out of the ground, right? Gold and silver comes out of the ground. It's a precious metal, right? Also, you got diamonds, things of that nature, right? So your diamonds are minerals, right? So anything that's harvested or cultivated out of the ground belongs to the indigenous people of the land, the primogenitors of the land, right? And the Moors are the indigenous people of the empire, right? That's what's stated in the treaty itself, that the Moorish Empire is the government. That immediately lets you know that the treaty is already identifying the party who is the sovereign, the Moorish governments. The Moroccans are the sovereigns. That's why it's placed in the Act Algeciras of 1906, okay? So as we keep reading about these banks, what should we fundamentally understand about banks? You must understand that when I say she who controls the land, controls its laws and its wealth, right? That's a triple principle. So how do we control the land? Through the Constitution, right? And enacting legislation, right? How do we control the land? Through legislation. That's the answer to the test, right? So if you go back to the first video, AMPAC study session, the first video is about what? How did the Moors lose the land? How did the Moors get it back? How did we lose the land? We lost it through a pen, right? Through hypothecation and it's cheap. But how do we get it back? We also get it back through a pen, through the proper written instruments known as the friendly applications and arrangements that set up the mechanisms, right? That way we get into diplomatic relations through our proper written instrument, which is the Constitution, right? And from there, now we get to control our land, we control our laws, and then we get into controlling the wealth. The wealth is always a byproduct of a job well done that we've been able to maintain the integrity of our domains, right? All right, so we'll go ahead and open up. Obviously, it's always about constitutions. This is AMPAC's constitution as an example. Now AMPAC has their constitution. New Mecca has their constitution, right? It's all about constitutional principles, right? This is the paramount document according to the United Nations Charter of 1945, right? Article 73 talks about the paramount document. It mentions about the Constitution, right? That's what this is all about. You can go back to Act Algeciras, that we're reading that now. Go to Articles 120 to 123 that talks about what? The Constitution and legislation. That's what this is all about, more. Without a Constitution, then you cannot control the land. That's what this is all about. The Constitution is based upon matriarchal principles, right? The matriarchs control the Constitution, right, on behalf of the human beings. The human beings now are the children of the mother, right? So now we're enforcing our rights through the proper written instrument. All right, let's go ahead and continue. Let's go ahead and get into the Act Algeciras, Chapter 3, Article 36. We'll read Article 36 through Article 40, okay? We get a nice clean read. We'll let the mother read, and then we'll go back and comprehend, okay? Let's go ahead and get started, mother.
Article 36. The proceeds of the special tax, Articles 33 and 66, shall form a special fund for which the bank shall keep a separate account. This fund shall be employed in conformity to the regulations adopted by the conference. In the case of its insufficiency and chargeable to later receipts, The bank may open a special credit for such fund, the amount of which should not exceed the total of the receipts for the previous year. The conditions of the rate and commission shall be the same as those established by the preceding article for advances to the Treasury on account current. Article 37. The bank shall take such measures as it may deem conducive to a sounder monetary situation in Morocco. Spanish currency shall continue to be permitted to circulate as legal tender. In consequence, the bank shall have the exclusive charge of purchasing precious metals, of striking and melting coins, as well as of all its other monetary operations for the account and profit of the Moorish government. Article 38. The home office of the bank shall be at Tangier, but it shall establish branches and agencies in the principal cities of Morocco, or in any other place it may deem expedient. Article 39. The land necessary for the establishment of the bank, as well as its branches and agencies in Morocco, shall be placed gratuitously at its disposal by the government, and at the expiration of the concession, the government shall retake possession of it and reimburse the bank for the cost of building these establishments. The bank shall further be authorized to purchase such houses and land as it may require for the same purpose. Article 40. The Sharifian government shall ensure and be responsible for the safety and protection of the bank, its branches and agencies. To this end, it shall place an adequate guard at the disposal of each establishment in every city.
All right, thank you, Mother. So that's Articles 36 through 40. We'll go back now and use our discernment, get a basic understanding of what we just read, keeping in mind that this was written in 1906, so some of these circumstances are not applicable today, right? Always remember that this was written in terms of chapter 3. A part of this was in regards to the fact that the Sultan had taken a loan, right? So some of these provisions about how does the Sultan have the obligation of paying back the loans, as well as the Sultan now bringing in new taxes and revenue on behalf of the Empire State, right? So always keep that in mind. I'll always point that out to you from time to time. Okay, so Article 36, let's get into it, okay? Article 36, the proceeds of the special tax, Articles 33 and 66, shall form a special fund for which the bank shall keep a separate account. This fund shall be employed in conformity to the regulations adopted by the conference. In the case of its insufficiencies, the chargeable to later receipts, the bank may open a special credit for such fund, the amount of which should not exceed the total of the receipts for the previous year. The conditions of the rate and commission shall be the same as those established by the preceding article for advances to the Treasury on account current. Article 37, the bank shall take such measures as it may deem conducive to a sounder monetary situation in Morocco. Spanish currency shall continue to be permitted to circulate as legal tender. In consequence, the bank shall have the exclusive charge of purchasing precious metals, of striking and melting coins, as well as all its other monetary operations for the account and profit of the Moorish government. Okay, so let's go back and look at Article 37. So Article 37, the bank shall take such measures as it may deem conducive to a sounder monetary situation in Morocco. Spanish currency shall continue to be permitted to circulate as legal tender. What is this all about? So the bank, as we establish our national bank, right, the Empire Bank, such as a placeholder name such as the Empire Bank of Morocco, the national bank that oversees all of northwest of Mexico, right, that national bank has the power to establish a monetary fund, right? Like we all always heard about the International Monetary Fund, the IMF. That's exactly what they're setting up, a monetary fund, right? So as it relates to Moors and their bank, we have the power to establish our monetary fund. We can now strike gold and silver with our mint, right? We can establish promissory notes, right? Based upon the currency, okay? So this is all about understanding the functions of the bank. The bank shall take such measures as it may deem conducive to a sounder monetary situation in Morocco. That gives us the power to do what we need to do with our banks to put us in a position that's referred to economic liberty without any inequality. Okay? What's this Spanish currency all about? What you have to remember is that for a while there, Tangier had what you call an extended territory over into what's modern day known as the Kingdom of Morocco, right? So the Kingdom of Morocco was using some Spanish currency at that time, right? Even if you go back to the Treaty of Peace and Friendship, Article 16, it talks about the fact that the colonists were using Mexican coin, Mexican dollar. So it's always been about this Spanish coin. But during this time in 1906, now the Sultan's getting ready to be in a position where he's getting ready to start minting his own coin. That way now he can issue his own notes, okay? So in the meantime, the Spanish currency, right? The tender, right? Currency lender, the lending tender, let me correct that, hold up. The legal tender of the Spanish coin could still be used while the Sultan was in transition to now establishing his own gold, silver, and his own currency, all right? You got to understand that. It's an overlapping time, all right? Continuing. In consequence, the bank shall have the exclusive charge of purchasing precious metals or striking and melting coins, as well as all its other monetary operations for the account and profit of the Moorish government. So the Moorish government is charged the affairs of doing what? Creating coins, right? So right here it talks about these precious metals, right? Precious metals, that's your gold and silver that comes out of the ground. But during this time, the Sultan was purchasing these precious metals. What will Moors do of northwest of Mexico, right, in the empire? Well, we're not going to purchase metals from the colonists who have cultivated the metals out of our own land. That's ridiculous. We would never ask them to loan us metals or purchase something from them. Well, the reality is they're holding on to our assets, our effects, our property. No, it needs to be returned. It needs to be reposited. It needs to be deposited back to us. That's the difference based upon 1906 versus now the 21st century, right? This is all about making the competent claim to our property, and the gold is a part of those. Gold bullion is a part of that, right? So after we get our gold, the Moorish government, I'm talking about the empire government, our centralized governments that oversees all the interdependent states, the Moorish states, our government, our centralized government will now, in harmony with the central bank, let's say it's the Empire Bank of Morocco, right? Whatever, placeholder. We're now getting to a point where they strike the coin and create now currency, okay? That's what the treaty says. Let's continue. Article 38. The home office of the bank shall be at Tangier, but it shall establish branches and agencies in the principal cities of Morocco or in any other place it may deem expedient. Okay, that's self-explanatory. Article 39, the land necessary for the establishment of the bank, as well as its branches and agencies in Morocco, shall be placed gratuitously at its disposal by the government. What type of government? The Moroccan government. And at the expiration of the concessions, the government shall retake possession of it and reimburse the bank for the cost of building these establishments. The bank shall further be authorized to purchase such houses and land as it may require for the same purpose. What is Article 39 all about? Let's get a basic understanding. The land that was necessary for building the banks, okay? So remember now, Great Britain and Spain has loaned money to the Sultan. Now here comes France loaning money to the Sultan. So what's happening is now the Sultan is building banks in any cities, any domain that he wants, right? He's extending that sovereignty of establishing banks. But since the colonists have injected capital into the hands of the Sultan, now the colonists now say, okay, when you build these banks, the colonists have a lien on those banks, the structure itself as the collateral, the real estate itself, because the Sultan owes this money back. So they're using the banks, the land and the structure as the collateral, okay? So when you read Article 39 back in 1906, just to explain to you, France Britain and Spain were saying, okay, we got a lien on these properties until you pay back this loan. So when they talk about the concession is the initial capital that was injected to the Sultan, okay? So now they're saying we still have a lien on those banks, okay? All the shareholders, okay? All right, so Article 39, the land necessary for the establishment of the bank, as well as its branches and agencies in Morocco, shall be placed gratuitously at its disposal by the government. And at the expiration of the concessions of the government shall retake possession of it and reimburse the bank for the cost of building these establishments. So what's happening? The Sultan now had to still pay the colonists for the structure that they had built as it relates to the banks. Because that's what the lien was about, putting together the banks, building the banks, etc., right? So they still have to pay back the money. And now the Moorish government and the Sultan, when they finally pay back the loans, they still have to pay now the colonists for the fact that they have now built those banks, right? So you have to pay that off and compensate the colonists. Now the Moorish government and the empire owns these buildings free and clear. Okay, that's what you got to understand about the possessions, okay? We're paying them back for what they had built. Now this is 1906. I'm just trying to tell you the story of 1906, okay? The bank shall further be authorized to purchase such houses and land as it may require for the same purpose, okay? So what's happening here? Anytime the Moors get into establishing banks, our Moorish banks, we're projecting, right? When we start to establish our banks, obviously we would need some land in order to build a Moorish banks, right? With that being said, we can now claim land called eminent domain, right? Eminent domain means that the government comes in and now designates a parcel of land as being going from a private use to a public use. Now we can build any structure on that land, whether it's a bank or any type of buildings. Now it goes from a private use, because someone owned it privately. Now the government comes in on the eminent domain and now claims that land and compensates that private person with whatever monies that's owed for that particular land, okay? That must be understood. On the eminent domain, we can identify any land that we want to claim now is going to be public land that's open to the public, okay? Instead of private land that's only open to that person who's the holder in due course of a deed, all right? We'll talk about deeds another day. Okay. Article 40. The Sharifian government shall ensure and be responsible for the safety and protection of the bank, its branches, and agencies. To this end, it shall place on an adequate guard at the disposal of each establishment in every city. All right, so obviously we need guards to guard our banks. All right, that's self-explanatory. Okay, let's go ahead and get into Articles 41 through 45. Okay, Mother?
The bank, its branches and agencies shall be exempt from all imposts or dues, ordinary or extraordinary, existing or to be created. The same exemptions shall be extended to real estate devoted to its use and to the certificates and coupons of its shares and to its notes, the importation and exportation of metals and coins intended for banking operations shall be authorized and exempted from every tax. Article 42. The Sharifian government shall exercise its high supervision over the bank by a high commissioner, whom it shall appoint after a previous agreement with the bank's board of directors. This high commissioner shall have the right to examine into the management of the bank. He shall supervise the issuance of bank notes and shall see that the provisions of the concession are strictly observed. The High Commissioner shall sign every note or affix thereto his seal. He shall be charged with the supervision of the relations between the bank and the imperial treasury. He shall take no part in the administration or transaction of the banking business, but he shall always have the right to attend the meetings of the censors. The Sharifian government shall appoint 1 or 2 deputy commissioners who shall be especially charged with the supervision of the financial transactions of the treasury with the bank. Article 43. A set of rules defining the relations of the bank and of the Moorish government shall be framed by the special committee provided for in Article 57 and approved by the censors. Article 44. The bank, organized with the approval of the government of His Sharifian Majesty in the form of a corporation, shall be governed by the French law and relative thereto. Article 45. Actions instituted in Morocco by the bank shall be brought before the consular court of the defendant or before the jurisdiction of Morocco in accordance with the rules of competence established by the Sharifian treaties and firmans. Actions instituted in Morocco against the bank shall be brought before a special tribunal consisting of 3 consular magistrates and 2 associates. The diplomatic body shall each year arrange the list of magistrates, associates, and substitutes. This tribunal shall apply to such cases the rules of law, procedure, and competence established by the French legislation in commercial matters. Appeals from governments pronounced by this tribunal shall be taken to the Federal Court of Lausanne, whose decision shall be final.
All right, thank you very much. So that's Articles 41 through 45, right? So let's go back and recap.
We started with 40.
Oh, 40, okay, thank you, Mother.
But
40.
You didn't read it.
Yeah, 40 through 45.
Then we started with 41, but we started the first part.
With
You
40.
didn't read the first 5. You didn't read the first one. We started with 36.
Yeah, 36 through 40.
You started with 37.
Oh, I did?
Yeah.
I didn't know that. No worries, they'll be all right. Okay. All right, Dow, we'll pick it up from here. Article 40. Okay, so Article 40. The Sharifian government, oh, just a moment.
Forty-one.
41, that's what it is, all right. Yeah, you see my little green marker? That lets me know that I'm at the end where I need to start. Okay, Mother, thank you very much. Okay, Dow, here we go. All right, so Article 41, okay? The bank. Okay, so Article 41, the bank, its branches and agencies shall be exempt from all imports or dues, ordinary or extraordinary, existing or to be created. The same exemption shall be extended to real estate devoted to its use, and to certificates and coupons of its shares and to its notes. So what does that mean? Banks don't pay taxes. Whatever land that banks sit on, they don't pay taxes if that bank is a government bank. Private banks pay taxes, not government banks. Okay, so that if that's the bank of the state, it does not pay taxes. All right, but anyone who has a private bank, they must pay taxes because that's a privatized organization. Okay. The same exemption shall be extended to real estate devoted to its use, and to the certificates and coupons of its shares, and to its notes. The importation and exportation of metals and coins intended for banking operations shall be authorized and exempted from every tax. So we're importing or exporting any type of funds, those things are not taxed, okay? Non-taxable. Okay, let's continue. Article 42. The Sharifian government shall exercise its high supervision over the bank by a high commission, who shall be appointed after previous agreement with the bank's board of directors. So what's happening here immediately? The Moors, once we have our national bank, right, we'll appoint a high commissioner that oversees that national bank, all right? So it'd be a Moorish commissioner, okay? The high commissioner shall have the right to examine into the management of the bank. He shall supervise in issuance of bank notes, and shall see that the provisions of the concessions are strictly observed. So that concession, that's that loan that's being paid back to France, as well as now just bringing in all of the currency, right? That the Cadi is now bringing in taxes and revenue, okay? Let's continue. The High Commissioner shall sign every note or affix thereto his seal. He shall be charged with the supervision of the relations between the bank and the imperial treasury. So the High Commissioner has a huge responsibility to sign off on whatever notes that we create as Moors, all right? Just like the United States so-called treasurer, right, Janet Yellen at this time in the year 2022. So Janet Yellen right now, the United States is signing off on their Federal Reserve notes, right? But really, Janet Yellen really works on behalf of the Federal Reserve because the United States doesn't have a treasury. They have now their privatized Federal Reserve, and now Janet Yellen signs off on it. However, in our jurisdiction, our Moorish commissioner will sign off on our Federal Reserve notes, right? Our notes, that way they authorize the notes, okay? Or at least put their seal on it. Let's continue. He shall take no part in the administration of transactions of the banking business, but he shall always have the right to attend the meetings of the censors. Now, what are censors, right? That's a word that we're not familiar with, okay? What are censors as it relates to banking? Well, let's talk about that. Censors. Mother, can you read this, please?
An official who examines material that is about to be released, such as books, movies, news, and art, and suppresses any parts that are considered obscene, politically unacceptable, or a threat to security. The report was approved by the military censors. Synonyms: expurgator, examiner, inspector, editor.
All right, so the censor is the Moors that will sit and monitor what's going on with the national bank, right? They're the overseers to make sure that those notes, any currency that we're using, is utilized based upon our balance sheet, inventory, paying back debts, etc., right? So the censor oversees it to make sure that they're now making sure that everyone else at the bank are doing their job. The censor, right? They're basically the referee, okay? We'll learn more about that in the future. Let's continue. The Sharifian government shall appoint 1 or 2 deputy commissioners who shall be especially charged with the supervision of the financial transactions of the treasury with the bank. So you remember now, you have a state bank and then you have a treasury, okay? Then you have a national trust. So you got all these 3 moving parts. So the Moors will start to understand that we have to have senior officers that are good in banking to oversee these different elements of banking, okay? The censors are part of that, and then they set up deputy censors who maintain an organized dual society as it relates to banking, because banking is very important as it relates to a state, right? If you don't have money, then obviously you can't operate as an independent state. You must have the means to be able to now get into what? Trade and relations with other states, all right? So money is very important. Right now, if you look over in Africa, you see a lot of African states having problems with finance, right? They're thinking about loaning money, borrowing money from the IMF. Some of the states don't want to borrow money from the IMF. Some of the African states are borrowing money from China. It's always about the currency. So every state, every Moorish state must control their gold, silver, and currency. Then we have to establish our reserves. That way we're not putting ourselves in a situation where we have to borrow anything from anyone, all right? We must have someone that's always maintaining the checkbook, all right? So that's the job of the censor, the deputies, the commissioner, etc. We're going to talk about that more in the future, all right? We're just giving a brief right now. Article 43, a set of rules defining the relations of the bank and the Moorish government shall be framed by the special committee provided for in Article 57 and approved by the censors. Article 44, the bank organized with the approval of the government of His Sharifian Majesty in the form of a corporation shall be governed by the French law relative thereto. What is that all about? Isn't that kind of a weird article, Article 44? Let's read it again. Article 44, the bank organized with the approval of the government of His Sharifian Majesty in the form of a corporation shall be governed by the French law relative thereto. What does that tell you immediately? See, France still had their tentacles in dealing with that bank because France had loaned money to the Sultan. So even though the Sultan and the Moorish government was governing the bank, but since France had a lien on the bank, France made sure they put in the treaty that their law still has somewhat jurisdiction over that particular infrastructure and that institution of that bank because they still had a lien on the empire. They were using the bank as collateral. They were using the new minted coins of the Sultan as collateral, right? So they made sure they put in this treaty a means for them to collect on any past due debts, right? All right, let's continue. 45, Article 45. Actions instituted in Morocco by the bank shall be brought before the consular court of the defendant or before the jurisdiction of Morocco in accordance with the rules of competence established by the Sharifian treaties and firmans. Let's pause right there. This is a very important article, okay? Now, let me remind them more. We're in Article 45 right now, okay? We're going to go a little deeper with this. Article 45. Okay. Right now, what do I have up here? Right now, I have page 197 of France versus United States of America, 1952. Remember, on page 197, the ICJ points out to the Moors these several articles that point out how do you utilize consular court, right? So Article 45 is one of the articles that the ICJ had pointed out, okay? Let's go back now to the treaty. Article 45. Why is this important? Because Moors learn how to utilize their consular court when they have a dispute with people in our banks, right? If the colonists are doing something to compromise the rights of our banks, we get to bring our consular courts in to deal with that dispute, all right? So listen. Article 45. Actions instituted in Morocco by the bank shall be brought before the consular court of the defendant or before the jurisdiction of Morocco in accordance with the rules of competence established by the Sharifian treaties and firmans. Now, this word competence is a very important word, as I keep pointing out to Moors. That's an international law word. Competence doesn't mean you went from black to being a Moor. It means, do you understand the competency of having a Moor state government and having the credentials of that state, right? That is competency. Having now Moorish national identification is competency. But competency is more or less for those persons who have the emanating document according to the Vienna Convention of 1969, Article 2, Section C. The emanating document is the governmental credentials. That way you can maintain the affairs of the state. And you can deal with any disputes with another disputing state, right? So competency is a very important word, but this is all about the consular court utilizing its competency. It must be the competent consular court that's now enforcing what? The treaties, the provisions of the treaties, and firmans. Now, what is firmans? Okay, let's learn about firmans. Okay. Firman. Okay, mother.
1. A sovereign's edict. Synonyms: decree, order, command, commandment, proclamation, mandate. 2. A grant or permit. Synonyms: authorization, license, pass, voucher, ticket, warrant, document, certification, passport, visa.
All right, so firman, okay, the sovereign issues an edict, right? So the firman comes from the sovereign, right? About the edict, right? But the firman is about decrees, orders, commands, commandments, proclamation, mandate. It is a grant or permit, okay? We're going to learn a lot more about what's happening with this firman, okay? We really need to dig into this a little bit, all right? So watch this. What's an edict? Okay, let's learn more about that real quick. Okay, mother.
Noun. 1. An official order or proclamation issued by a person in authority. Clovis issued an edict protecting church property. Synonyms: decree, firman, order, command, commandment, mandate, proclamation, pronouncement, dictum, dictate, fiat, bill, promulgation, law, statute, act, enactment, ordinance, regulation, rule, ruling, injunction, manifesto.
All right. So an edict is about what? The official order or proclamation issued by a person in authority. So the person is what? The state. And then the state has its officials, its officers, its elected officers of the state issuing what? An edict, right? And the edict is about the official order or proclamation issued by a person in authority, right? The synonyms are about decrees and firmans, orders, commands, right? So what is this all about? The edict. Let's go back up. Firman. A sovereign's edict. So who can give orders, commands, decrees? Only the sovereign, right? Only the sovereign can give orders, okay, in their own jurisdiction, okay? So let's get an understanding real quick about this whole firman and edict. We have to really get an understanding of what's happening here. When you hear me say that the United States is an international organization, right? That's the Vienna Convention of 1969, Article 2, right? It talks about that the international organizations are also considered intergovernmental organizations, right? We learned that in the Vienna Convention of 1969. Let's go ahead and click on it real quick. Okay, Section I. International organization means an intergovernmental organization. Okay, that's what an international organization is. It's not a state. An international organization is not a state. And keep in mind, the word state is spelled with a capital S. When you read the declarations from international law, they always spell the word state with a capital S. Why? Because state is what? A noun. Well, what's a noun? Person, place, or thing. Capital S. You see? So United States always spells with what? A lowercase s. Why is that? Because they know it's a part of their charters. Listen to me. When we start studying, the parties must be known, right? Right now we're learning about the state bank. Well, only the state can have banks, okay? So listen, when I say that the United States and their so-called several union states, they are chartered colonies. They're not states. They use the word state, but that's what you call a connotative linguistic. The reality of the denotative linguistic is that they are actually a chartered colony. They're a chartered colony, i.e. an organ or subsidiary of the United States International Organization. Let's learn what a charter is. Why are we going over this? Because as we establish state banks, who's allowed to have a state bank? Only a state. But there's only, in terms of the Empire of Morocco, how many states are there right now? Competent states. Well, you got AMPAC, AMPAG, New Mecca, United States of America is the contracting state on the treaty. And then you've got the Kingdom of Morocco, who's also a contracting state. Okay? So only the states can be sovereign. Okay? Listen to me. Charter, mother.
Noun, an instrument emanating from the sovereign power in the nature of a grant, either to the whole nation or to a class or portion of the people, or to a colony or dependency, and assuring to them certain rights and liberties.
All right, pause right there. Okay, before we keep reading, let's just get a basic understanding of what we just read about charter. A charter, now, is an instrument emanating from the sovereign power in the nature of a grant, either to the whole nation or to the class or portion of the people or to a colony or dependency, and assuring to them certain rights and liberties. What's happening? Who can set up a charter? Only the sovereigns. The sovereigns set up an instrument that's emanating. They can extend a grant to who? Colonies, and those colonies are in a dependency status. You have to understand the history, Moors. Sidi Muhammad allowed the 13 colonies to establish the United States of America as a constitution. Their constitution is actually a charter. Sidi Muhammad, who was acting as the administrator over the vast estate of the Moorish Empire, he was acting as administrator. He was acting as the sovereign who's overseeing the vast estate. He extended now what? A grant. He granted, Sidi Muhammad granted, because Sidi Muhammad at the time was the sovereign power overseeing the Moorish Empire. Sidi Muhammad granted to the colonies a dependency status of what? Liberties and rights through their charter called the United States of America, okay? And then the United States of America, as the contracting state on the treaty, established what? The United States. The United States is an international organization, i.e. an intergovernmental organization. But really, what is it? It is a charter. That charter was set up by the United States of America in what? February 21st of 1871 through their act of Congress, right? Chapter 62, sections 1, and especially sections 9. We'll talk about that, okay? So listen. The parties must be known. Who can be a state? Only the United States of America and only Moors who are now contracting states to the treaties that they have acceded to, ratified, and deposited and promulgated with the United Nations Charter, Article 102. All right, we're the only ones that can enforce banks because we're the contracting state, capital S. Okay, listen. So now, Sidi Muhammad allows the United States of America to establish itself as a colony, and it automatically became a dependency. A dependency to who? The sovereign power. Where are we going with this? The United States of America and the United States and its several chartered colonies all have a dependency to the sovereign power. What's the sovereign power? More state governments. And once all the more states come together and create what's called an interdependency to now the national state that would be called the United States of Morocco as a placeholder name. Now the United States of Morocco will now be the sovereign power that oversees all the more states and also oversees what? The colonies. All right? Let's continue with the reading. You're going to learn something here today. So the charter, let's continue. The charter powers. Okay, Mother, continue to read from such.
Such was the Great Charter, or Magna Carta, and such also were the charters granted to certain of the English colonies in America.
Stop. So the charters were extended to who? Certain of the English colonies in America. This is the Black's Law Dictionary. This is United States of America citizens and their barristers, i.e. their lawyers, right? Their attorneys are writing this. They know that the United States of America was extended a charter in order for them to establish what they modernly known as America, because America is nothing but a colony, right? It's a franchisor that now has set up franchises that are better known as their several union states, but they're not states. They're charter colonies. Even the United States is admitting it right here, that certain of the English colonies in America were granted what? Status as colonies, and they'll say in America, but it's really where? In Morocco, right? But their jurisdiction based upon their constitution says the United States of America. But the United States of America is located where? In Morocco. The United States is located where? In Morocco. Okay? Let's continue, Mother.
A charter differs from a constitution in that the former is granted by the sovereign, while the latter is established by the people themselves.
Okay, did you catch what just happened here? A charter differs from a constitution in that the former is granted by the sovereign, right? While the latter is established by the people themselves. Let's work it backwards. The people themselves establish what? Constitutions. Once the Constitution is formed, the Constitution can now set up what? Charters. So the charters are an extension of the Constitution. But the people themselves have to set up the Constitution before you can even have a charter. So the several so-called 50 states are not states. They're charter colonies. that were set up by the United States of America's Constitution. So the United States of America's Constitution, now it set up what? The United States, February 21st, 1871, Act of Congress, Chapter 62, Section 1 says, now they set up a charter called the United States. And then the United States started to set up what? 50 different charters. They're not states. They use the word state to fool you and to fool their citizens. But they're still colonies to this very day. They're charter colonies. Moore's got to get to the point to change their vernacular and stop referring to them as the state of such and such and the state of Colorado as an example. Once we get into what's called a succession, now the AMPAC has succeeded now and done what? Well, we've done. We're the succeeding state, right? We've taken over the territory, right? We've taken over the territory. Now the former chartered colony known as the state of Colorado, right? But it's a former chartered colony known as the state of Colorado. That's how you write it. Because first they were chartered under the nom de guerre of a state. But when they write the word state, they write it as a lowercase s or all caps. They never write it as a noun, as capital S, lowercase t-a-t-e. They don't do that. Okay? Let's continue.
An act of a legislature creating a corporation or creating and defining the franchise of a corporation. Also, a corporation's constitution or organic law. That is to say, the articles of incorporation taken in connection with the law under which the corporation was organized.
Okay, so what have we learned thus far already? The act of legislation creating a corporation. So the United States of America, through their legislation in 1871, Act of Congress, did what? They created a corporation. That's what they said, right? Or defining the franchise of a corporation. All of their 50 chartered colonies are franchisees of the franchisor. All right? Let's continue.
USA is the franchisor.
Yes. So the United States of America is acting as the franchisor who set up the United States. The United States, they're operating through the United States to establish now the other several 50 chartered colonies. All right? The problem is they vacated the seats of the United States of America. The United States of America, as the contracting state, only exists in name only, right? In name only. So therefore, they have no government. They have no government officials operating in the United States of America. Their entire government now operates underneath the United States International Organization. They've created a problem for themselves. They do not have any officers with the emanating document to be able to prove that they are the authorized authority of the United States of America. Because all of their officers take an oath to who? The United States, and not the United States of America.
The authority by virtue of which an organized body acts, a contract between the state and the corporation, between the corporation and the stockholders, and between the stockholders and the state.
All right, so the authority by virtue of which an organized body acts. So they created an organized body, right, called the United States International Organization. And that body is a charter. But that charter of the United States was also set up by a charter called the United States of America. This is a layer on top of layer on top of layer of charters, right? So the United States of America is a charter. The United States is a charter. And all their so-called 50 states are also charters, but they're not states, right? They're all corporations, okay? They're all franchisees, okay? All right, so it says right here, a contract between the state and the corporation, between the corporation and the stockholders, and between the stockholders and the state. You see what's happening? So since the United States is running everything, it's nothing but a bunch of stockholders running that corporation. And this is the reason why the inflation is so high, etc., because they're always interested in their profits. They're not running it like a government, because the government takes care of the welfare of the people, whereas the corporation takes care of the welfare of who? Shareholders. You see? All right, let's continue. All right, so I just wanted to show you that more. Just a moment. So in the definition of charter, it is an instrument emanating from the sovereign power. So Sidi Muhammad allowed the United States of America to exist, and they were a charter. In the nature of a grant, so Sidi Muhammad granted the colonists who were refugees, who were immigrants with an E. Immigrant with an E means you're interested now having a permanent residence. You're not an immigrant with an I passing through. You're an immigrant with an E, that you're seeking permanent residence in someone else's land. All right? So the 13 colonies, which were set up by the British Moors and the pale-faced Europeans, are now refugees. They're immigrants with an E, right? They're seeking asylum in Morocco, and Sidi Muhammad comes in, allows them to establish their own reservation, their own colony, to be now in a status of colony, the status of dependency to who? The sovereign. That's what your treaties are all about. Your treaties are all about the Moorish governments. The Moroccan government is the sovereign power over the colonies, and the colonies have a dependency because the treaties have granted them a right and liberty to remain in Morocco, right? Then you look at the Treaty of Peace and Friendship, 1836, says what? They can stay here until one of the parties petitions to abandon the treaty, right? So all their colonies have a right to be in Morocco according to the treaties until the Moorish Empire decides now to petition to abandon the treaties, all right? That must be understood. Why is this important to understand? When you start talking about the firman, right? Let's go back to your treaty. It's all about treaties and firmans. What's the firmans? The grants. Let's go back. You got to understand what's happening. Let's go back. Okay? So the firmans are what? Grants or permits. I.e. the firman is also what? Charters. The charters are the grants and the permits that allow them to stay in Morocco. That's the reason why the word firman is used in the treaty, because it's about the treaties and it's about the charters that they have set up. So the treaties have sovereign authority over their firmans. And what are they firmans? Charters, grants, colonies, right? Anything that's attached to Morocco is just a permission for them to remain in Morocco as long as we allow them to stay. They have a privileged jurisdiction in Morocco according to the permits, grants, charters. And everything they are claiming now, they're claiming it under permission, under a charter. That must be understood. They're not states. They're what? Charter colonies, formerly known as State of Colorado. That's an example. How you write it. Don't refer to them as states anymore, Moors. Refer to them as charter colonies. That's exactly what they are. How do we know that? Because they confessed it. Okay, let's go back to the definition of charter. Charter. They confess it's a colony. They wrote this, right? Dependency. And then they turn around and tell you what? What do they say? That the charters are granted to certain of the English colonies in America. That's what they wrote. You see? They themselves refer to themselves as a charter. That must be understood. Okay. Let's go back to your treaty. So now the consular court The competent consular court has the sovereign jurisdiction over treaties, charters, grants, and permits. That must be understood. Which means you have sovereignty over all what? Their so-called states. In which they're not states. They're chartered colonies. Okay? Now do you understand the Treaty of Madrid? Okay, listen. Treaty of Madrid, Article 11. Why are we going through this? We're supposed to be talking about state banks, right? But the state banks sit on what? Land. We're talking about land. Who's allowed to have a state bank? Only states. So the United States of America is the only contracting state in Morocco that had permission to set up any type of bank. And any bank that even it sets up, our treaties oversee their firmans. And what are their firmans? All of their banking institutions are charters. All their banking institutions have permits, licenses that are now assessed to who? All those chartered colonies. And those chartered colonies are assessed back to who? The United States, which is a chartered colony. And the United States as a chartered colony is assessed back to who? The United States of America. And the United States of America is a chartered colony because the United States of America has what? A permit, a permission, a charter to remain in Morocco. That must be understood. And who oversees the United States of America? The Moorish Empire, i.e. the Moroccans, the competent Moorish states. The state is the sovereign, not the individual Moors. The state is the sovereign. And the state extends sovereignty to the Moorish nationals, and some of the Moorish nationals have governmental credentials to oversee any permits, any grants, any charters, any banking financial institutions, because those banking financial institutions are charters. That must be understood. Okay, Article 11. Mother?
The right to hold property is recognized in Morocco as belonging to all foreigners. The purchase of property must take place with the previous consent of the government, and the title of such property shall be subject to the forms prescribed by the laws of the country. Any question that may arise concerning this right shall be decided according to the same laws, with the privilege of appeal to the Minister of Foreign Affairs stipulated in the treaties.
All right, so Article 11 starts talking about property, right? Talking about property. Who can hold property? Only states, because the state is the sovereign. But according to the treaty, the sultans extended what? A permission, a grant. For who? For the colonies to hold property. If only they had the proper written instrument, and that proper written instrument is called a deed, right? Why are we talking about deeds right now? Because we're talking about state banks. Who do you think has all the deeds? The banks. At least that's what they say they have. They say they have banks. I mean, they have deeds, but we all know they don't have deeds, right? So listen. So the treaty allowed the foreigners to hold property. And those properties are all being held in what you call deeds. Okay? So only the state has the authority to hold on to deeds, to extend that deed, proper written instrument, over to anyone to have what they call a grant, a charter, permission, license, etc. Listen. The right to hold property is recognized in Morocco as belonging to all foreigners. The purchase of property must take place with the previous consent of the government. What government? The Moorish government. And the title of such property shall be subject to the forms prescribed by the laws of the country. What country? The Moroccan country. The Moroccan states, right? That's if we have competent Moorish states. So the competent Moorish states have the obligation to oversee any deeds, any proper written instruments, any charters, any permits, any licenses, right? That must be understood. Why is that important? Okay. Now you go to Article 7. This will make sense to you in just a moment. Article 7. Mother.
Foreigners' representatives shall inform the Sultan's Minister of Foreign Affairs in writing of any selections of an employee made by them.
Okay, continue.
They shall furnish annually to the said minister a list of the names of the persons protected by them or by their agents throughout the state of the Sultan of Morocco.
Stop right there. They shall furnish annually to the said minister a list of the names of the persons protected by them or by their agents throughout the states, capital S, states of the Sultan of Morocco. So the Sultan of Morocco has what? He's overseeing the states. What state? The state. The United States of America is the only contracting state with a capital S. And the United States of America has, as a charter, has set up the United States. And the United States now has issued what? All these chartered colonies known as the 50 Union States. But they're not states, they're chartered colonies. Nonetheless, who has sovereign power over them? The Sultan of Morocco. Now the Sultan means what? The states of Morocco. So throughout the states of the Sultan of Morocco. So let's start this all over again. I'm about to make sense of this for you. They shall furnish annually to the said Minister of Foreign Affairs a list of the names of the persons protected. Who are persons? States. But persons can also be individuals, right? It's a duality word. Persons can mean a state, or person can mean a human being, right? So right now, when you take a look at this, they're talking about individuals. But who else is under the protection of the sovereign power? The so-called 50 states of the United States, right? So right here, they shall furnish annually to the said minister a list of the names of the persons protected by them or by their agents throughout the states of the Sultan of Morocco. So the Moors already own all their so-called states, according to the treaties. We govern them as the sovereign power. So therefore, who do we deal with first? United States of America. Then the United States, and then there's several charter colonies. Because the United States of America is the contracting state. Why am I mentioning this? Because their so-called banks are claiming they have deeds. But the only person who can oversee deeds is the state. They don't have states. Only the United States of America is the contracting states. Everything else they have after that is a chartered colony known as an international organization, i.e. corporations. And the corporations can't control deeds. Only the state can control deeds, okay? So when we start to deal with them as it relates to banking, I'm talking banking right now. When we start to establish our banks and we're looking for land, they claim they got a deed, okay, produce it. Who's going to produce it? It should be who? The state. Because who's supposed to provide the protections of the list? It's supposed to be provided to the minister a list of names of the persons protected by them or by their agents throughout the states of the Sultan of Morocco. So the United States of America has the obligations to prove that any land that the Moors deem as eminent domain land, if the United States of America gets pushed back, they got to prove they got a deed. If they got a deed, then yeah, we pay them for that land. But if they don't have a deed, then eminent domain takes place, and then we'll negotiate whether we pay for that land or not if they can't produce the emanating document as it relates to a deed that makes some type of private ownership claim to that land. Because the treaty, Article 11, gave them permission to hold property in Morocco. But how do they hold it? They hold it by the proper written instrument called a deed. We'll talk about this later on, okay? All right. This is the Act of Congress, 1871. chapter 62, section 1, sets up how they set up this chartered colony, okay, of the United States. Okay? And then section 9 tells you about the oath that they take to the United States. Why are we talking about this? Because only when we get in a dispute with them, who are we disputing with? We can only dispute with what? The other contracting state. United States is not the contracting state. They're a chartered colony that's not a state because they themselves on their own record say they're what? A corporation. By their own admission, they're saying they're not a state. Let's read it. Okay, from the top, approved February 21st.
Approved February 21st, 1871.
Chapter 62.
Chapter 62. An act to provide a government for the District of Columbia. Be it enacted by the Senate and House of Representatives of the United States of America in Congress assembled, that all that part of the territory of the United States included within the limits of the District of Columbia be, and the same is hereby created into a government by the name of the District of Columbia, by which name it is hereby constituted a body corporate for municipal purpose, and may contract and be contracted with, sue and be sued, plead and be impleaded, have a seal and exercise all other powers of the municipal corporation not inconsistent with the Constitution and laws of the United States and the provisions of this act.
All right, let's pause right here. As you can already see, on the surface, you already recognize, they've already said the United States is a corporation. That's easy, right? But one of the things that I recognize about the Moors have been studying this document for decades. But what we fail to realize is the instructions that the United States of America was taking to establish another constitution for a permanent territory. They were telling the Moors the instructions, the answers to the test in order to establish government. Listen. Act of Congress, February 21st, 1871, Chapter 62, Section 1. Being enacted by the Senate and House of Representatives of the United States of America in Congress, assembled, that all part of the territory of the United States included within the limits of the District of Columbia be, and the same is hereby created into a government by name of the District of Columbia, by which name it is hereby constituted a body corporate for municipal purposes, and may contract and be contracted with, sue and be sued, plead and be impleaded, have a seal, and exercise all other powers of a municipal corporation not inconsistent with the Constitution and laws of the United States and the provisions of this act. What should Moors have taken away from this? Yeah, we get it that the United States of America created a corporation. Everybody knows that. But what was the lesson that Moors missed in this Section 1? We didn't recognize how the United States of America was showing you a step-by-step on how to do what? Set up a government. Here we go. First things first, the United States of America, okay? So the United States of America in Congress assembled, that all the part of the territory, so they identified a territory, permanent territory. What are we talking about right now? A treaty. Treaty of Montevideo, 1933, Article 1. It said what? It said you need a permanent population, permanent territory, government, and the ability to get into what? Diplomatic relations, consular relations, trade, etc. with other states, right? So first thing the United States of America does is what? Identify a territory, and they called it the United States. and included within the limits, what's that? That's a defined geographical territory, latitude, longitude, called a 10-mile square, Washington, D.C., of the District of Columbia, B, and the same is hereby created into a government. So Moore should understand, Moore's running the government, we need a defined territory in the name of what? The state. Okay? So created into a government by the name of the District of Columbia, by which the name is hereby constituted. So they came up with a constitution for the government and for that permanent territory of the United States within the limits. So they constituted a body corporate for municipal purposes and may contract and be contracted with, so states and corporations can be contracted with. Sue and be sued, states, organic states, right, and corporations can do what? Be sued and be sued, plead and be impleaded, have a seal. So now they've got a government, they got territory, they got a constitution, and they got a seal. They're setting up government. And exercise all other full powers of a municipal corporation not inconsistent with the Constitution and laws of the United States. So the Constitution was the name of the game. And Moores the whole time never established our own constitutions. We never identified the permanent territory to set up the constitution of a government. These were instructions. Do you understand what I'm saying here, Moores? We were so busy pointing fingers at the colonists that we should have been pointing a finger at ourselves to understand what this was really all about. How do you set up a government? It's with what? A pen. That's it. Okay, now, we already know that the United States is a corporation by their own admission. They're a chartered colony. Now you go down to section 9, okay? For more clarity, section 9. Section 9. Okay, Mother.
Section 9. And be it further enacted that members of the Legislative Assembly, before they enter upon their official duties, shall take and subscribe the following oath or affirmation. I do solemnly swear or affirm that I will support the Constitution of the United States.
Stop. Do you see now, Moores? The presidents, the governors, the mayors, all the so-called officials of their so-called states pledge their allegiance and affirmation to the Constitution of the United States. This is their oath that they take. They don't take their oath to the United States of America. The United States of America is the only contracting state that Sidi Mohammed allowed them to set up. But you must also understand that all of the sultans, including the kings of the Kingdom of Morocco, have acquiesced and allowed the United States to exist as an international organization that operates almost like a sovereign state around planet Earth. But the world knows that the United States is a corporation. The world knows that the United States is an intergovernmental organization, right? But it's not an organic state. And since the United States is not an organic state, it does not have the sovereignty of an organic state. All international organizations are subordinate to the sovereign power of a state. So you got sovereign power of a state, then you got international organizations and charters in that order. Why are we going over this? Because as more start to establish their state banks, we will start to now control our finance. And with our own finance, we will start getting to the point where we'll start overseeing even other banks that's in Morocco. And understanding those other banks that claim they have some jurisdiction based upon their state. And they don't have a state. Because none of their banks are assessed back to the United States of America. All their banks are part and parcel to the United States International Organization. Moors oversee everything. Why else am I explaining this to you? Moors have to understand, we cannot be belligerent towards the citizens of the United States or of their charter colonies. We cannot be overly aggressive towards them. Once they already know their status. And with their status, they know they're not an organic state. They already know the treaties already had jurisdiction over the United States of America, and they already know our Morris treaties have jurisdiction over their international organizations. They already know our Morris treaties have jurisdiction over their financial institutions. So when we start to get back into our sovereignty, like I said, she who controls the land, controls its laws and its wealth. When we start to enact legislation that oversees all banks in Morocco, we can't be overly aggressive. Why do I say that? Every state on planet Earth has connected themselves back to the United Nations International Monetary Fund, or they've connected themselves to other world banks or international banks. And all of those banks have connected themselves all the way back to the Empire of Morocco because of the United States is utilizing their currency that they call the dollar. And everybody on planet Earth has connected themselves to the matrix of the United States International Organization. When the Moors come in to govern, if we try to bully the United States or the International Monetary Fund too much, the whole system could collapse around the world. It's like a domino effect. We knock over the United States knocks over the United States of America. And all the states around planet Earth, like dominoes, they all fall. So we must understand, our job is to come in as a contracting state to now get into what's called friendly applications and set up the arrangements and the mechanisms based upon our economic liberty without any inequality. But we cannot be overly aggressive towards them because we realize they're not a state. Our job is to manage the affairs of our tenants. Our job is to manage the affairs of their charters. We oversee it as the sovereign power. I'm telling you right now, Moors, if we're too aggressive, we could turn the lights out on the whole world. Because our treaties give us that much power. But at the same time, we have to respect their economic liberty without any inequality as well. Because that's what treaties are about, vice versa, right? It's about respecting each other's sovereignty and jurisdiction. So as we start, learning more about chapter 3, as we start getting closer now to getting into chapter 4 to start talking about the Kaidi, the banking institutions is controlling commerce. Why am I talking about this so much? Because the only thing the colonists care about is money and power. That's it. And after you have so much money, the only thing left is power after that. So the Moors are going to immediately have both money and power. And we can't get drunk on that. We have to be better than our so-called colonists who came in and controlled our lands, our trust territories. We have to start understanding how to be the competent Moors. What does competent mean? You understand equality. You understand justice. You understand that if you do too much, if you have what's called an extraterritoriality and you try to control everything of the IMF or everything of the United States banks, such as Wells Fargo and Chase, etc., 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 the Moors have enough power to cut the lights out on the entire planet. We have to learn about what the title of the treaty says. Is a title of what? Treaties about what? Peace and friendship. So when Noble Drew Ali tells you, Moors, you're just plain rich, you're not rich, you're wealthy. What does wealth mean? You got residual monies coming in that will outlive even you. But those monies will never come in if the Moors come in and start to shut down everything because we're being overly aggressive. We got to find a way to manage them like you manage your tenant that's at your rental property. You manage them. You allow them what's called their quiet enjoyment. That's a legal term, quiet enjoyment. Because the treaties are about peace and friendship. The treaties have set it up with the Moorish government, the competent Moorish governments have dominion, have authority over any charter in Morocco. That's including the Charter of the United Nations. Because the Charter of the United Nations was established in 1945. Where? In Morocco. And the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, is governed by what? The United Nations. And Moors have jurisdiction over all banking institutions in Morocco. We are the most wealthiest people on planet Earth. Why? Because all the banks around planet Earth connect back to the United States. And we govern the United States and the United States of America, and both of them are charters. So from now on, Moors, we have to change our vernacular. They're not states. They're chartered colonies. Okay? Also known as the state of Colorado as an example. But the words you add in there now is former state of Colorado. So it's chartered colony. Formerly known as the state of Colorado. And understanding how their banking systems work. Only the sovereigns can control banks in their jurisdiction. So we as more states, we control all banking institutions in the empire. All right? But we must always understand the triple principle goes both ways. We as Moors have a lot of power. I told the Moors when I first started talking about the Act of Algeciras, I said, keep in mind, this is one of the most powerful treaties ever written. Ever written in history. They gave the Moorish governments supreme power over military, over police, over arms, and all banking in the empire. Where's the empire? Okay, let's talk about that real quick. When we take a look at the treaty, the Act of Algeciras, when we opened up and read the preamble, remember it listed all of those states, the ministers, plenipotentiaries? When they signed the Act of Algeciras, they also agreed that they were in where? The Moorish Empire. They agreed in the treaty that Europe is also the Moorish Empire. Anybody who has ever visited Europe have seen all the statues of the Moors, all their coats of arms. Great Britain, everywhere. Everywhere around planet Earth you find what? Pyramids, obelisks, right? Megalithic stones, Habu properties, right? It's all around the world. The world is the Moorish Empire. I don't say that just to, exaggerate. The footprint is there. So the Europeans, when they signed the treaty, the Act of Algeciras of 1906, right? They also agreed it was the Moorish Empire. We don't have to try to prove that to them. It's already in the treaty. Which means we oversee all banking in the empire. Where does the empire extend to? All around the world. But more specifically, as it relates to the signatory powers of the treaty, they also agree that where they reside is the Moorish Empire. Who signed it? Great Britain, Spain, Germany, Russia, the Holy See, etc., etc., etc. They also got banks too. This is why Noble Drew Ali told you, you're just plain rich. We're not rich, we're wealthy. But we'll never be able to keep that wealth if we're a belligerent towards the conquerors. We have to learn how to manage the affairs of those corporations. That must be understood, all right? So we're going to pick up the rest of this reading in class 60, all right? So I'm going to pause right there because I think we've read enough about this banking, right? Because it gets a little boring. I want now to get into a little bit of understanding some of the background as it relates to your sovereign power over all banks. But most importantly, we must understand that we got to come to the table, Moors. We got to come to the table and extend an olive branch. We are conquered people. We can't come to the table acting like Debo. It's not going to work. The world is not going to accept Moors and their Moorish states if they think we're going to be coming in and being belligerent. Why? Because the Moors got enough power in this treaty to turn the lights off of the world. They ain't going to let that happen. So we got to come into this as being noble Moors, interested in sitting at a round table, not a square table, a round table. But we must come into this with peace, right? Love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice. That's what this is all about. All right, so we'll continue this in class 60. I appreciate your patience. Islam.